Nicknamed the Dog of Death, Bane was feared by all. He was uncontrollable, aggressive, and powerful, and it was only a matter of time before something went terribly wrong. When Diane Whipple was floored by Bane outside her own apartment, she knew she had to fight for her life. But could the American sports star defeat the Dog of Death? Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. Diane Whipple lived on Pacific Avenue in San Francisco, but she wasn't the only one who lived there. It was an apartment block, and her neighbor was called Bane. Bane was huge and muscular. He weighed more than Diane did, and he was bred for fighting. Bane was a Presa Canario, a rare breed of dog that originated in the Canary Islands. He was very protective of his owners and earned a fearsome reputation in the apartment block and around the neighborhood. In fact, other dog owners would time their dog walks so they didn't bump into Bane. Some would carry pepper spray with them just in case they saw him. And that's not all. Bane's owners also had another Presa Canario, a female called Hera. She was also a massive dog, aggressive and completely uncontrollable, but it was Bane who earned the nickname Dog of Death. And it wasn't long before he lived up to his name. Diane lived with her long-term partner, Sharon Smith. Diane was everything young, sporty girls aspired to be. She grew up on Long Island, and it wasn't long before it was clear just how much she excelled at sports. Turning her hand to anything, Diane chose lacrosse as her main sport and became a two-time All-American in high school and made the U.S. Women's Lacrosse World Cup team. But lacrosse wasn't the only thing she excelled at. Diane just missed out on making the U.S. Olympic team for 800 meters track and field. But she turned that disappointment into something else. She decided to become a sports coach. She knew everything about competing at the highest level, and she had the skills, experience, and wisdom to pass on to the next generation. In 2001, she was working as a lacrosse coach at St. Mary's College of California in Moraga, California. She was admired by those she coached and a favorite member of the staff amongst pupils. She was 33 years old, and life was going very well for her, but all that was about to change. Diane was walking along the corridor in her apartment block when Bane appeared from around the corner. He was on his leash, but that didn't mean he was under control. He weighed 130 pounds. His owners, 59-year-old Robert Knoll and 45-year-old Marjorie Knoller, could hardly hold him back when he lunged at passers-by. One vet had officially written to Robert and Marjorie to warn them how dangerous Bane was. The vet refused to treat the dog again for fear of his own life. He could tell that something terrible was about to happen and urged them not to keep him in their household. But Robert and Marjorie ignored the warnings. When Diane saw Bane, she froze. Adrenaline coursed through her body, flooding her veins. Her heart thundered in her chest. Their eyes locked. Bane immediately lunged forward and snapped his powerful jaws. Robert yanked him backwards and yelled at him. The snarling hound barely flinched and snapped at Diane once again, but she raced up to her apartment and slammed the door shut. It had been a very close call. Diane was terrified. Bane's teeth had come within inches of her wrist, and she knew that it could have been a serious injury if he had grabbed her. When Sharon came home from work, Diane told her what had happened. It was clear to Sharon just how shaken Diane was. Something needed to be done about those dogs. And just 1 month later, Diane wouldn't be so lucky. She was returning from the grocery store. It was late afternoon on January 26, 2001. 5 days before her 35th birthday. Her hands were full with plastic shopping bags, and she swung the door open of the apartment block. She began climbing the stairs up to her hallway. At the same time, Marjorie decided to take Bane and Hera up to the roof for some exercise. Robert was away, so it was up to Marjorie to walk the two dogs. She put their leashes on and stepped outside her apartment. It was just one flight of stairs up to the roof. But just at that moment, Diane came around the corner. It was just like before. Diane froze. But this time, Marjorie couldn't hold both dogs back. They were simply too strong for her, and they rushed forward at Diane. In a split second, they were onto her. Marjorie yelled at them, trying desperately to get them under control, but they had seen red. They were bred to fight, guard, and protect, and that's what they were doing. They saw Diane as an intruder, and she was going to pay heavily for it. Diane braced herself for the attack. She was immediately thrown to the floor, and both dogs flattened her in seconds. The ferociousness of the attack was indescribable. Although the female Hera didn't fully attack Diane, Bane was in a frenzy. Diane could feel her life slipping away. She could feel the dog's breath on her, the crushing sensation of its bite around her neck. She couldn't breathe. The screams and commotion were overheard by a neighbor who immediately dialed 911. The emergency responders rushed to the scene, but they were too late. Diane was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Her jugular vein had been sliced open by Bane. She was rushed to San Francisco General Hospital, where she died a short while later of blood loss. The emergency responders couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. It was a devastating and entirely avoidable tragedy. Somebody who was so young and fit and healthy had their life taken from them in the most painful way imaginable. Whilst Diana's family and loved ones began the grieving process and struggled to come to terms with never seeing her again, strange facts began coming out about the dog's owners. Bane and Hera used to belong to someone else, a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, serving a life sentence at Pelican Bay. His name was Paul Cornfed Schneider. Robert and Marjorie had been his lawyers and offered to care for the dogs while he was incarcerated. Not only that, but bizarrely, they also officially adopted Paul himself. When asked why on earth they adopted an adult inmate, Robert casually replied, "You don't have to change diapers or worry about the sheriff bringing him home at 14 for underage drinking. At 11 o'clock, you'll know where he is." But their connection to Paul and the dogs was likely far deeper than that. Police suspected the two were acting as intermediaries in the criminal breeding of fighting dogs that were ultimately being shipped to the Mexican mafia to protect their drug operation. With the case growing against them, Robert and Marjorie tried to turn the blame. They accused Diane of bringing her own death upon herself by wearing strong perfume, using steroids, and hitting Marjorie before the attack took place. Of course, none of this stood up in court. Diane's body was covered in 77 bite marks. Only the top of her head and the soles of her feet were untouched by Bane's vicious attack. Marjorie insisted that she had intervened, but she was only sporting 3 small scratches. It was clear that she hadn't tried that hard. Bane was euthanized immediately after the attack, and Hera a year later. Robert was imprisoned for manslaughter, and Marjorie given 15 years to life for second-degree murder. Diane's girlfriend Sharon sued Robert and Marjorie and was awarded $1.5 million, which she put towards a scholarship foundation in Diane's name.